What's up, everybody? Once again, this is Paul
Alejandro.
and we are back with another episode of StatX Radio. Once again, as you can tell, our wonderful co-host PJ is currently in the wings. He is in negotiations between Marvel and Sony so we can actually use him again. Unfortunately, that contract has taken a large hit on him. He's wanting no less than $45 million for this one, but I think we can work with him, and he'll be on hopefully before this episode is over. But if not, you'll see him on the next one.
Yes, I bet he's gonna be in this one. I know he's kind of eager to talk about something specific that happened this week, so hopefully he can join in. But yeah, this episode 14 and our second one, and now we're weekly again. Remember how we were talking about that one last week? We made the unanimous decision to make this a new Monday show, no matter what. So yeah, hopefully we can still keep the cadence going because we kind of need it. So how you doing, Paul?
I am doing all right. I'll be honest. The job has been a little difficult lately. There's been a lot of stuff. For those that don't know, I work as a salesman over at a car dealership, specifically Kias. So all across the country, y'all know what Kias are, and it's the cars themselves are awesome. The people I work with, not so much actually. So
hopefully they're not listening.
Yeah, I highly doubt that. But shoot, some of them don't even know what computers are.
Ooh, and that kind of people.
There are genuinely a couple of them, and one of them's about 80 years old. He does not work with computers. He only has a phone that he calls people up with, and like a stack of folders of all these people he's sold over the cars, not people that he's sold. Anyway, he talks to them a lot and gets a lot of sales from it. But in the end, they're a bunch of crazy, determined people. It's a difficult environment to be in. So I'm hoping I can make a change with that soon, but right now we're just kind of in that transitionary stage. How about you?
It's been I would say a decent week. I'm still at my production company internship, still learning the ropes and editing and all that. I'm actually baking in some subtitles for a commercial for one of our clients right now, which I'm learning that because I've learned that there's a software where you can create subtitles, and there's also a way for you to bake in subtitles through Adobe Premiere. So I'm like, you can do it both ways. That's interesting. I don't know which one I like different, but I'm putting my Spanish/English skills to the test there. And tomorrow I have to be there early morning because we're also in production. So I've been learning the ropes a bit of what pre-production, production, and post-production have been, and it is a doozy. And it shows me. Good thing this is an internship because I'm learning the things I like and the things I don't like and what I want to specialize. So,
you think it's something you want to stick with, or is it more of a very much a temporary situation?
It's definitely temporary. I'm doing it more towards the goal of learning tools that I can apply towards StatX, because I know for sure that we have to make more video content. And right now, PJ is our only editor, and I think he would highly appreciate if he has someone else that can also shoulder the load and also create more.
Yeah, I think he would enjoy that.
So that's why I'm kind of doing it for that, especially now that PJ is hitting the saddle with 2 jobs, getting late at night and all that. It's like I think he would appreciate it if he doesn't also have to always take care of this stuff. So
yeah.
So I'm kind of using it because I know those tools are gonna help me in the future, because who knows?
For real. And even outside of this, I think just knowing how to edit things helps you a lot with both your appreciation of watching videos and also editing your own stuff in the future.
Exactly. So we'll see how it goes. I still don't know how long I will still be there. I am not eager to find that out. I'd rather just live in the moment, because if I'm only thinking about when does this end, I think I may miss it. I think I may miss the experience. I'd rather live day to day. Who wants to just be thinking about the future, right?
Exactly. Well, anyway, speaking of the future, we've got a few things that have recently come in and have turned from the future into the present.
Yeah.
One of which is, drumroll, the new Joker movie.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Alejandro, you have seen it, and I know PJ just saw it as well recently. Unfortunately,
I'm
maybe he
hot
can
of the presses.
share his thoughts whenever he comes in. But why don't you go ahead and tell us what you thought of while I reach over and grab my phone?
WOW.
Oh,
Wow.
spelling it out.
Yeah. I'm like, it's been a while since I've left a movie that has made me so uncomfortable, so unsettled, and so shook. Is it like a huge revolution in filmmaking and all that? Hell no. Is it an insanely executed character study of a complete madman? That's what Joker is. Like,
Interesting. Okay.
like I was like fearing that this thing was gonna be way too overhyped because the reviews came out like what, a month ago. That's like way too long to wait.
Yeah.
And let anticipation kind of build towards what it is. And the thing is that it's a very simple movie whenever you're actually looking at it. So if you're expecting anything completely revolutionary, I think some disappointment could be felt, especially because of how the discourse has been. But if you look at it as like 2 hours ish of looking at Joaquin Phoenix completely own and dominate and deteriorate very subtly and very convincingly as the minutes pass by, and you go from sympathy to disgust as the movie goes. It's I can't stress enough like how impactful that thing is. It makes me so happy that DC actually did this because this is basically them adapting their DC Black Label / Elseworlds comic book line, which is basically, think about it this way. Have you read comic books?
I have, but there are a lot of terminology that I'm not fully aware of. Like the Elseworlds, that's their multiverse, right?
Yeah, Elseworlds, it's that was their old label to differentiate some stories as completely standalone.
Okay.
Like
the Batman who smiles and stuff like that.
Yeah, something like that. So basically, you know how like the comic book movies now is all about having a cinematic universe that kind of builds on each other, kind of like
some
what the
connected
MCU
setup.
has been. And Marvel has been doing it well. DC not so much, especially since only recently they started getting good from Wonder Woman and then Aquaman and then Shazam even this year. But there's something super appealing about them letting a normal filmmaker that has like a cool idea of doing something completely out of continuity and just make a movie that starts, has a middle, has kind of an ending, but it's a ways that it's not building a universe, kind of like functions as its own story and takes some liberties with what you think it's the Joker's origin story, but adds to it enough twists and turns for it to feel fresh while still remaining familiar, but then just letting the tone and the feel kind of be its own thing. Like, this is like watching a Martin Scorsese film through and through, and I think he was even a producer in this thing, which wouldn't surprise me. Like, it's like shot that way. It's like a 70s timepiece and all that. It even has Robert freaking De Niro in it. So
really,
that's he's like a big he's like a talk show guy. So
right, he's like the Jay Leno of that universe. Okay,
exactly. So
I remember seeing that trailer. Actually.
So you can really feel that they really were going for that vibe, and I think they nailed it. It's also so funny how, have you been reading all the crap about like the military warning that this film was gonna inspire incels and all of that? And
I have heard a lot about that. Sadly.
And I feel that's just media fear mongering in a way, because I think one thing this movie really does well, it's not making you feel like, hell yeah, I'm rooting for Arthur here and all that. I think in a way that if you're feeling like that, I think it says more about who you are than what the movie really does. Like, you're meant to feel disgusted. You're meant to feel Like you're meant to feel like, man, this is wrong. Oof, man, that's we shouldn't be cheering for this stuff. And I think it does a good enough job to kind of let itself speak for itself in a way for you to react however you want to react. And I think it's very thought provoking. It's gonna be divisive. I can totally see that, like the way how unsettling it is gonna divide people. And I think that's gonna be its greatest strength, because it's just not a cookie cutter, just another movie for you to go and have fun with. It's not even like The Dark Knight, which also was like intense and all that, because this is more psychological. You even question what things are truth and what isn't. Yeah, it's like hats off for them to pull this off, because DC's track record hasn't been great, as we were kind of talking last week, with sort of reboot or not. I think that, like, if WB and DC want to really stand out right now, that Marvel now it's at the very top of the top, this is the way to do it. Do something unique. Don't just do the same thing they're doing, because when you're putting yourself in the comparison, and if we're honest, Marvel just does that kind of film better. But why not do something different? Because Marvel is never gonna try to do something this psychological, ever.
Yeah, and not to mention being owned by Disney is going to severely limit their content as well on what they can perform.
Yeah, especially with the death of the Netflix shows, which were the only way for them to do like something more mature.
Yeah,
like, those things were nipped in the bud, and now they don't exist. They're canceled. They live in purgatory now.
And Disney Plus has already said they're not going to host anything that's rated R on their streaming site.
Which makes me super disappointed, especially because they announced the Moon Knight TV series. And Moon Knight is a very dark, twisted Marvel character. That's like the whole thing about that character. So I'm really curious to see how they do a more toned down version of Moon Knight.
Well, as I understand it, you can make something pretty dark and intense while leaving it PG-13. I mean, not to go back on the Dark Knight, but just look at that. And Dark Knight Rises and a lot of other shows that have a lot more culture, not just like having it as like a comic book movie, you know, just regular movies. I'm just not one of those culture people that knows all of these other movies, because I'm not as knowledgeable about movies in general. But there's a lot of stuff you can do with PG-13, I would say, and you could really make something out of it without having to resort to the, I wouldn't say gratuitous, but you know, having to rely on something like that, because at some point you can use the content, that the heavier content, to really enrich something. But I think a lot of people will fall into that category of using the rated R stamp to go all out and almost cheapen it, you know?
And I'll even say this about Joker, because this one was actually rated R. There is only one scene that I would say it's incredibly violent and gratuitous in that whole movie. And I feel the R rated, other than a lot of use of the F-bomb, it's used well to really paint you into like this psychological deterioration of this version of Joker. He laughs all the time. It's like you can really feel the oppression of this world completely turning him. And I feel you can't quite do that on a PG-13, because you will be shying away a little bit from some stuff. But going back to Dark Knight, one of the more impressive things that they managed to do by pushing the PG-13 to its limits, because remember when like Joker cut the was it the mouth from a dude, the black dude, and it completely cuts away, but he actually did it. It adds to the intensity, because you can imagine it. I think just imagining the violence without us actually seeing it
exactly
is one of the things that made the Dark Knight so impressive even back then, because that could have easily been R. The Dark Knight could have easily been an R-rated movie, but it wasn't. And it shows that you can, if you're a master of your craft, you can pull it off. But I'm glad Joker was able to do something that wasn't 100,000% too gratuitous.
And that's good, because I was actually really concerned about that. Being somebody, for the sake of the podcast, I have not seen the Joker yet, so I have absolutely no context for anything. And as Alejandro has been giving me this information, this is as much as I know about it outside of the 2 trailers that I think I've seen of it. So yes, thank you for adding all of that kind of context and understanding to it, because honestly, I was lost on how people were really both harping on it so much and also singing its praises so heavily, because I'm trying to kind of understand, just grasping out of the air to think, well, maybe that's because of this thing might happen, and maybe this will happen. And I'm trying to make the plot out of these trailers that I know, and also whatever information you're giving me.
Yeah, I'll tell you from right now, it's a very plot thin movie.
Plot thin, okay.
Yeah, it's very plot thin in a way that even some of like the twists and turns you can really see coming from a mile away. Like I was like sitting next to a friend that we were kind of chatting, commenting some stuff, and I was like, I bet this is what's gonna happen. And there you go, that's what happens. But again, because it's not about the plot, it's about like the character's deterioration. So like, and I feel the whole fear mongering, like all the things that were being thrown at this movie, is because of what happened at Aurora in 2012. It's
yes, unfortunately. And actually, something you brought up that I was thinking of, that I would love to bring up if I can get my thoughts together for a second. Man, I had it for a second. Jog my memory. We were talking about that
you couldn't see how many people were throwing this movie into the mud and others praising it, and you were trying to kind of piece together just through the trailers.
Yeah, and there was something else that you were telling me that had, man, it brought up a really good point. No, it was actually just before that, and it really sucks because I was thinking about it, and then the little noise jumped up, and it just took me right out of it. Dang.
Yeah.
Maybe is I'll start kind of thinking off the top of my head, and maybe it'll come to me. So I know we kind of turned the Joker talk into possibly talking about the use of horrific content in movies, and how I think a lot of people will kind of use that as a crutch. We're kind of working on that already. And something that I always thought was interesting was how people will they'll use that as a crutch. Man, I'm having trouble getting this train back on tracks. Holy moly.
Yeah.
This is just, we should just cut all of this out. My goodness. Dang, I should just write down literally everything that comes into my head. Yes. Oh, yeah, of course. The suspense. That's what it was.
Yes.
So, what you said specifically, where you said the gentleman got his mouth cut open by the Joker, and they cut away from it to add the suspense. That's what I was thinking. There is a quote. I cannot remember who exactly said it. I believe it was Alfred Hitchcock. And I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to heavily paraphrase.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yes. If you have a group of people and there's just a bomb under the table, but you don't tell them about it and the bomb explodes, people are shocked.
It's only 5 seconds of shock.
Exactly. But then if you have a situation where you tell the audience by showing them that there's a bomb under the table, then you get 10 minutes of just finger-biting suspense before that happens. So I think, excuse me, that a lot of people that are filmmakers and just any content creators in general, I could even extend that to something like video games or even books on the way they'll describe something, is we can get so much based on knowledge, or knowing something in one sense where you know something bad is about to happen. Like, instance, we know, like, for instance, that the Joker is going to become evil and deranged and crazy by the end of all this. So it does not. There it is. The full thing is coming together. Oh,
yeah, there it goes.
Oh, yeah, it's all coming together. So that we got all of that stuff. And just because I said the Crunk reference is starting to slip away from me again. Man, this is aging is horrible for me. And oh my goodness.
You're doing a great job. Don't worry.
I know. I am just going all over the place. I was thinking about it. It was right there on the top of my thoughts. Man, it's been a long day, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like 11 o'clock at night. So
yeah, for me, 11:30. Yeah. So apologize for anybody listening in after the fact. But yes, so you've got the manipulation of knowledge on one hand, where you are telling somebody information and then using that to their advantage. Whereas if you take that information away, where like you have the Joker in Dark Knight, it cuts away from that. The fear of the unknown and the audience's imagination is always going to make something far more intense and terrifying than
Actually showing it.
than actually showing it, which I don't want to jump into an entirely different subject, but I'll briefly point out A Quiet Place. That was one thing that a lot of people harped on, was that they showed the monster in like the first 5-10 minutes or something, so we knew what this thing was the whole time. And yes, it was definitely still a very intense and terrifying movie, but I believe and a lot of other people believe that if they had kept that essence of mystery, then it would actually add to the environment and the experience.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
which
usually
kinda,
never seeing something, it's always gonna be better than actually seeing something, because sometimes reality can't meet expectation no matter what. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. And you mentioning how the Joker basically uses that Alfred Hitchcock mantra to its full extent, like that's literally this movie. Like you know, all the time, like it's yeah, it's just, it just knows how to play on your expectation that way, and it's just watching a painting happen and unfurl
exactly.
as you go. Probably my only problem with it is that near the very end, it starts to get a little too political, throwing every kind of thing that I feel I have seen as a political talking point over the last year, probably, but in a way that it doesn't make a stance, but it just makes it a little too distracting if you like kind of catch the references. This happens near the end of the movie, so I was like, okay, that's kind of clunky. I don't think this is the time to do that, because this is the thing that people are going to latch onto. But just an observation. And also, this is more me kind of harping on what it wasn't intending to do, but part of me is kind of sad that there won't be a sequel to this, because I'm really in, because it's like, it kind of tells a complete story of what it set out to do, but it sets up a really interesting world that I would like to see it continue in a way. But part of me is also like, don't wish that, you idiot. Let this be a piece of art. But because that just shows how well they built what they did. And there's Batman references there, overt and subtle also. So it's like, it's very hard for me to not think about like the possibilities, because they put these things there, even though they said that this was a standalone, which is what makes it strong. But even the strongest Elseworld stories have sequels, because it's still its own thing. It's like there's amazing standalone stories that are only 4 issues, for example, like Kingdom Come, seminal DC story. And that's why I'm like, yeah, hopefully let's see what happens. Apparently this movie is gonna make a buttload of money, which
absolutely.
which to me is like, it's all a product of the fear mongering also, which people don't realize, that the more you tell people to be careful of something or say something's bad, the more eager you're gonna make anyone to go see it. So
it's been happening all through just the last decade or so. I mean, look at Harry Potter, you look at Hunger Games, everybody just, it's gonna blow up a second somebody says don't do it.
Exactly. So that's why I'm like, yeah, this is another example. But props to Joaquin Phoenix. I hope he earns an Oscar nomination for this thing, because wow, like just how he acts, like I'm surprised he didn't get himself unhinged by the end of this thing, because boy, like that's all I'll say about it, because boy. And yeah, I really hope this movie gets real good recognition, and we just move away from all this discourse that built over the last month over it. So yeah, it's a really great movie. And PJ did the review for us. I was gonna do the review, but I had a unfortunate incident that a friend's grandmother passed away that day. So the group I was gonna see it with, we ended up not seeing it. I saw it today. But had I written the review like PJ did, he gave it 100%. I would totally give it that. Even though I know it's not perfect, it's just a masterpiece for what it was trying to do. And Yep, I highly recommend it with trepidation, knowing that it's not a movie you're gonna have fun with. It's gonna mess you up. So it's something I have to
Good
be
to
careful.
know.
Yeah, it's something I have to be careful about the kind of movie it is. But
Yeah.
I like that we can get these kinds of movies now, and yeah,
Well, all
hopefully
right.
we'll see. Yeah, so yeah, that's Joker talk.
Awesome. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump through a couple of other things off the top of our heads.
Mhm.
First thing, we'll dip slightly into the video game area, and then
Mhm.
maybe come back out into the pop culture as a whole.
Yeah.
Excuse
What have
me.
you been playing, Paul?
I have still been playing Red Dead Online, Alejandro. I'll
Yeah.
be entirely honest; it has absorbed my life back into it.
You're really tempting me to give that
Son,
thing a shot again. I'm
I
trying not to because there's too many stuff happening right now that I'm like, I don't want to go to an old thing right now, but yeah, you're tempting me.
let me tell you, actually, I could probably make a full video on this one day, but the older I've gotten, the more I've started to respect and understand the importance of negative space in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
But let me clarify that, not the ballooned out proportions of something like Just Cause 2, which had a massive map and no life to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's something more on the lines of Breath of the Wild,
Mm-hmm.
where you have this open world, but there is life in every
Yeah.
corner of it. There's animals, there's trees moving. You can just feel yourself really in this environment,
There's
riding
not a
through it.
million icons for you to like go and check mark and all that. I think that's what you're meaning, right? Like it's
I would
like there's
I would
actual
almost
space for you to just.
extend that. Yes, I agree with what you're saying. But then you have something like, you'd say, our next subject would be the new Ghost Recon
Oh,
Breakpoint. I'll
oof,
go into that,
oof.
which I was kind of tying this into it. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have something that, like Red Dead Redemption and Breath of the Wild, that does it amazingly, where you are
Mm-hmm.
just stuck in this world. There's nothing inhibiting your eyes as you're watching all of this. You're just really soaking it in. Any music that plays is soft, it's gentle.
Mm-hmm.
I remember several times riding through, you have like a little strings of violin or a acoustic guitar strums a couple of chords, and I don't even notice that stuff until I'm just lost in the middle of this wilderness and I'm off hunting an animal, tracking a fox, and in the end it's not even about all the other crazy stuff that causes problems with Red Dead Online that you've heard and has valid concerns about. The barriers to entry and the issues that it has, I won't even bother going into that, but just the ability to ride through something and lose yourself for a couple hours after a long, rough day at work where you're getting blasted by sensory overload has been something that I've really started to respect and almost crave in my video games lately.
Oh, yeah.
So
Because
that's
we've
something,
become
yeah.
overly like I feel games have become overly packed with content because developers feel that's what gamers want, that they've kind of lost sight of the fact of letting a game breathe, of
I
restraint.
agree.
They lost sight of restraint because they feel like by putting more, we're adding more value to your $60, blah blah blah. And even though like last week I did my whole spiel about the things I didn't like about Red Dead 2 specifically gameplay wise, the world is still magnificent. It's like you're just like being lost in it and how meticulously detailed it is, how meticulous, how like it respects your time in a way of like letting you enough gasps of space for you to like just soak it all in, and without always like looking at your map and like there's 100 different icons here for different collectibles and side quests and all that, because that's basically become the Ubisoft mantra, as you can see with the Breakpoint. From the videos I've been seeing. And not even that, Wildlands was like that, and not even that, Assassin's Creed Odyssey was like that, and before that even Assassin's Creed Origins. Like Ubisoft open world games are the complete opposite. It's like, let's packet everything in so that you don't breathe at all. So,
oh yes, and I know this can kind of go into your segment that you were interested in. Was there more that you wanted to go ahead and start telling us about the sameness lately of Ubisoft
Jesus Christ,
games?
like because this has become more apparent now that I've been like dipping back to the role games. Like I was mentioning last week that I've been going through the Splinter Cell series, like the old games, like the old Xbox games, and I've been dipping also to the Ghost Recon games from 360, like Advanced Warfighter and Future Soldier, and I even played Rainbow Six Vegas, and thinking about the original Assassin's Creed and even the Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends games. Like, I look at all those games, I'm like, this all felt different. They felt unique and fresh. And I feel this generation, Ubisoft has decided that every freaking game that they're gonna do, it's an open world game that has towers to climb, maps to open, collectibles galore, and all of that. And taking it further, they have now dipped into the let's make a games as a service looter shooter. And not only they did that with The Division and they released that sequel this year, but apparently that's a thing in Wildlands now, that it's an always online game with loot in it, that it's served for you to like buy a asinine amount of microtransactions that they say it's not they're just optional, but the fact that they put way too many of them kind of says otherwise. It's kind of like getting a little gross that's like the reason why they're doing this kind of game, because they haven't done like a more compact game in a long time. And I'm like, as a fan of theirs, and I've been a fan of them for a long time, especially because other games decide to be like multiplayer only, at least they have a semblance of single player. I feel they're homogenizing it enough that I'm like, I feel I'm good not buying the new Far Cry or not buying the new Ghost Recon or whatever it is, because it's just gonna be the same freaking game. And even though I really, really dug Assassin's Creed Odyssey last year, which I was very surprised because that was a long ass game and I didn't really love their previous one, Origins, I'm just noticing it now that what's funny is that I even toyed with Ghost Recon Wildlands today because I was like, I don't think I finished this. And I played it, I was like, both that and Assassin's Creed Odyssey have the same mechanic of, we have in Wildlands, you have a drone that you can stick out up there and like mark all your enemies. And Assassin's Creed, you have your eagle to mark every enemy. So it's like, they're doing the same thing. And I'm like, why don't they get it? They're like burning me out because I'm like, why even bother buying any new game, because it's just gonna be the same. Like, why? Like,
yeah, and you're dropping some truth bombs so heavy that I fear that Ubisoft is sending their death squads to kick your door down any second.
Oh, absolutely, because because it sucks to see them, which have been one of my favorite developers for a while, like getting less and less creative this way and homogenizing themselves like this. It's just like, there's beauty and diversity, and this is even a problem with Sony in a way. Like, I was talking with I remember, I don't know if you saw the chat I did with PJ, how we were saying that the PlayStation 4 era has been a really great era for Sony. But like, if you just look at trailers and all that, they're really just doing third-person action adventure games, like with slight variation. And I will say that because I played all of them, and you can, like, God of War is not Horizon. They play completely different. Spider-Man is not like God of War or Horizon. Uncharted 4 is a different kind of third-person game from the other ones. Even Days Gone, that may be probably the more generic of all of them, even has its own unique things. But by the rest, the case where's the Little Big Planets? Where's the kill zones? Where's the more experimental thing that they used to do? So it's like the homogenization of just doing one genre. It's like becoming a little bit more apparent this generation, where in previous generations, I feel there was a little bit more variety. And I can see where people like PJ are kind of coming from, even though I still freaking love those games because they don't come too often. That's the key there. How often do we get a Sony exclusive? Rarely ever, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
I'd say this has been more of a renaissance of the last like 2 or 3 years of I'm gonna probably date myself. I can't even remember when Uncharted 4 came out, but
2016.
2016,
yeah.
really? Okay.
Yeah. 3 years
I'd say
ago.
that almost started like the new wave of everything. You had Uncharted 4, you had
The Last Guardian.
Last Guardian, you had the
Horizon.
re-release of Last of Us. I mean, I know that was back.
Oh, that was the re-release was in 2014 of Last of Us.
Okay, so maybe I might not count that one then, just because of the more recentness has been just kind of this boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Because you had the Uncharted spin-off with Chloe.
Lost Legacy.
Lost Legacy. Okay, I knew it was Lost something.
Mhm.
And then you had, of course, you got your Spider-Man, you got your God of War, you've got the for some reason the Order 1886 popped into my head.
Yeah, that was even before
Get that
Uncharted
out of my
4, yeah.
head. Oh gosh.
The biggest missed opportunity of this generation. That could have been so cool.
We don't even need to talk about
that
that thing.
been so cool.
I'm still kind of torn up about the idea of it. But yeah, moving on from that, of course, you had the Days Gone and everything, and now Last of Us 2 coming out next year.
Ghost of Tsushima, also the Sucker Punch game from the guys that made Infamous. They're making also an open world game.
Yeah.
That's not bad. It's in feudal Japan, and I'm like, okay, we haven't had a feudal Japan game in a while, so that gets
especially after we've been asking Ubisoft forever to make a feudal Japan. And now with them changing it to like the RPG elements, it's not even going to be fun anymore.
Yeah, because it's like now you have to over level
overgeneralization,
and now you have your loot. Get your blues and purples and yellows. It's like every game now is a loot game, and I'm like, I love those games, but not all of them have to be there.
Yeah.
Not all of them, especially like I'm playing Destiny 2 also, which I'll get into when I got into my games. But it's like that's as far as loot games as I want to get. I want to play other stuff. So please, developers, please understand you're overflowing the market with the sameness of so many of these games. Like, you're gonna crash the market. You're gonna crash on yourselves if you don't dare to be different. Dare to be different. Like, people will award you for that. This is bad. Probably they're not. Who knows?
Yeah, there's
a reason they keep doing that.
The earth keeps turning and looter shooters keep flooding the market. So in any case, that was our last episode. What's the new with going on? Do you want to go into your Destiny 2? I feel like we can probably either jump into that or we can talk about the opposite end of that spectrum with something of an indie game.
Yeah, let's do your indie game before I go into the charted lands of Destiny. So,
take a quick side B turn on this situation. I'll wear out my vocal cords for a second. So I have, excuse me, besides Red Dead Online, I've been playing a wonderful little indie game called Katana Zero. And I know I specifically didn't tell you too much about it, Alejandro, so I'll go ahead and tell you, and as well as anybody else back at home, what this game is about. Excuse me.
What platform is it on?
It is going to be on the Switch and Steam, I believe.
Okay.
I think somebody said there might be a chance of it coming to the PS4, but as of right now, I think it's only on those two platforms, PC and Switch. So the premise of it is that it's like a 16 or 32-bit game, 2D. I wouldn't call it hack and slash. I'll break it down. The whole premise is that it's a cyberpunk kind of universe, post-war kind of thing, where they had kind of their own sci-fi version of the Vietnam War. You are a super soldier that kind of is now going off and assassinating people. You are given these requirements and missions by your psychiatrist, who gives you a dose of a special drug before every mission, and that's kind of your payment. So this drug allows you to manipulate of time. So you go into a room and the whole gameplay for the most part for each mission is you predicting what will happen in this room once you kick the door in.
Interesting. So it's like a time travel game, sort of?
Not quite, because you're not actually time traveling. It is only your prediction of what will happen. So picture this:
a premonition game, basically.
So you're predicting that once you go in, you're going to kill such and such people. You have, you can pick up like bottles and lampshades and stuff and throw them at people to kill them instantly. Every enemy will die in one hit, but you will also die in one hit. And the whole idea, if you can almost picture it like Hotline Miami, except instead of top down, it is side scrolling, a little more anime-esque, and also you have a katana instead of using weapons that you pick up.
What it also sort of reminds me also? It's like a 2D version of Super Hot. almost.
Yes, actually,
Yeah,
you could
so
totally make that similarity. That's the
mhm,
word.
yeah.
But yeah, so it's a lot of charm in it. It's got a lot of those that kind of like 8-bit wallpaper that you see sometimes scrolling through Tumblr late at night, where you have this really pristine, detailed bedroom or something, and it's dusk and you see rain on the outside or something. It's kind of like that whole feel, that whole motif, that
Hmm.
atmosphere, you know. And so you go through this whole game, but the whole idea is it really mind screws you, because you have no memories as your character, and you know just about as much as he does. As you're figuring out and weaving things out, I won't spoil it for all the people that would suggest it, because it's only $15 to experience this game, and I wouldn't say it's lengthy by any stretch of the imagination. I'd say I probably sunk maybe 10 hours roughly in
For
it.
$15, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's there was a lot more missions than I expected to actually go through, and once you do that, you can do several different modifiers to make the game more interesting. You can do, like, there's a hard mode that makes it even more difficult somehow. I don't know how. You can take off the slow-mo motions to change things up and whatnot, but basically the idea is that you're figuring yourself out while you're assassinating these people, and you can also change the way things play out based on the way you act and respond to certain characters during the course of the game. And that's all I'll say about that, because it
Hmm.
can very much jack up your mind as you're trying to figure some things out, and replaying some things as man, I'm trying to like tell stuff without giving it away. It's so difficult.
It's hard, right? Like
It is
that was
really
the hardest
difficult.
thing of my Joker thing. Like I was
Right.
able to tell a lot without saying a lot. So
Just know that the perception of time begins to get worse and worse as the game goes on, and at some point you're not entirely sure what you're witnessing is real and what is not real, and what is only like the drug, and what you're actually fighting and seeing and experiencing. And you start to get real tripped out near the end, like kind of Rick and Morty, like some
yeah.
next level, like, oh boy, this is tripping me out. Like the game glitches out, pulls some
Into
Metal
the
Gear Solid
multiverse crap.
moments on you. It'll start to like talk to you directly, like Spec Ops: The Line kind of stuff. If you want to think about like fourth wall breaking, it just
Yeah.
it starts to mess with your head a little bit as the game goes on. But I highly recommend it. Only $15 on the Switch, on PC, and I definitely think it's worth it. So,
Great. For
as
15
we've
bucks, that
mentioned that,
I'm literally gonna take a look into that. Like, you sold me. Like, you literally sold me, because I want more unique. After going through my rant of things being homogenized, that seems like something that I want to play.
yes, and I'm somebody that is not much of an, excuse me, indie player.
Mhm.
So when somebody told me about that, I decided to take a crack at it, and I'm very glad I did.
Yeah. So right.
So, how about speaking of things that make us happy, Alejandra, are you happy with the new Destiny updates?
I am, even though it took a while for me to get in. Like,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
There was some
So,
server issues, weren't there?
oh yeah. Like, even though this game has been running for 5 years, they had a really tough first few hours on Tuesday, because I feel like this was a mistake on their part on releasing the new expansion and the free-to-play version at the same time. So it's like, maybe the smartest thing would have been to release the free-to-play version maybe 2 weeks ago and then roll in the expansion to the like this week. But I digress. Yeah, after being put in queue 13,244, I remember because I screenshotted it. I got in and saw a game that once again completely reinvented itself. That's been what's been so interesting about Destiny 2 specifically. Like, the game I played back in 2017 is not the same game I'm playing in 2019, and it's just been 2 years. Like, Bungie has been like really good at like seeing the things that worked and didn't work about their vanilla release, rework some of the systems for last year's expansion, which is when things got really positive for the series, and now did it again now by making it a full-on RPG. Like, oh my god, like if you've ever played WoW or like an RPG, like just now, like the amount of stats that you have to manage now with like the different armor capabilities and the way that you build your character and all that makes me spend more time like thinking about different builds in a way that I never thought about in Destiny before. And the coolest thing about all of this is that you don't even have to buy the expansion to try all of this. Like they baked everything that they've improved and all that. It's something that you can really experience just by downloading the Destiny 2 New Light version, which actually gives you quite a lot for not paying a cent. And as for the expansion itself, like it's really cool to see like them like having up to think that Destiny has been going for 5 years now. To me, it's like mind-blowing. Like it's been 5 years since the original came out. That's like I can't believe it's been that long. And this expansion kind of plays into some sort of nostalgia for people that have stuck into the with this series for a while. Like in the original game, like you would go to the moon, and you know, moon's haunted memes and all that like are well covered by today. But like the first time you went to the moon was back in 2014, and you didn't really go there. And the moon wasn't even here in Destiny 2, so they brought back that whole world again while heavily expanding upon it. So it's like there's always been a complaint that Destiny would recycle a lot of content too often, and that is because they have development tools that are really crappy, that they take forever to do things with them. So you think about like trying to log into like, let's say, Adobe Premiere, but if you wanted to make a small edit in your video, you had to load the program overnight for it to be like completely open by the time you came into work the next day. Then whenever you rendered any changes, you have to wait until the next day for them to fully be implemented. And you know how game development can be like very erratic and things can be changing a lot. So that's like been very well documented in the years that Destiny has happened. So I can see the concern of people who are like, oh, they're selling us a world that they've already done before. But they've expanded the playmass of that world. They've like retouched it visually, and it's been 5 years already that I feel they're kind of allowed to be able to do that. And let's not forget, Bungie split from Activision this year. And that cut off a lot of the funding that a mega corporation of like Activision would have. So the fact that they even were able to pull up this expansion that has quite a bit in it, it's quite impressive for considering the time crunch. And it's mostly really polished, and the campaign was fun but also very abrupt and how it ends. But it's like because it's like you reach a really cool moment like in what you feel is like the last mission, but then it just drops you back into the world and you're like, wait, that's it? But then I was kind of reading online what Bungie was saying, that the campaign is just the beginning, because they've moved now into a seasons format where they're gonna keep giving content through weeks, and like including story and lore, and that's gonna move from seasons to seasons, kind of like what Fortnite does whenever they do a new season, that they add something new, and there's like
I see what you're saying.
Like a meta narrative that you follow. So my thing is that the campaign for last year's expansion felt a little bit more complete in the campaign you play, even though Destiny is not a campaign game. It's more like an MMO game, that it's more about the end game and the things you do after you finish that campaign. It was last year where they started toying around with like seasonal story and development. Now they're baking that thing from the very beginning, even if it comes at the expense of you completing the campaign. Really feels like an introduction. But knowing that they're planning now to continue supporting this game for the next year and change, I'm like, that's okay. More Destiny is more Destiny. And my thing with Destiny is that, to me, it's the best playing shooter of this generation, nonstop. Like,
really?
I just like, it's just the feel of it. Like, there's just something about like the weight of things and the movement and how things pop and everything mixed with like the stick movement and sound design and all that of every weapon that you shoot in that game. There's just something that feels weighty about it that other shooters don't, that are more like twitchy, like let's say Titanfall or Apex or Call of Duty don't feel, even though those games play really well. There's just something about that. Like, I feel like no one can play Destiny and be like, the shooting is not fun. I feel that's like that is like the thing they nail, especially in the looter shooter space. It's like I was playing Borderlands 3 I've been playing Borderlands 3, and going back to Destiny is like night and day, like how the shooting feels. I bet you'll feel the same way. Even though Borderlands 3 feels really good, like just Destiny 2, just as a feel and the shooting and all that is just above and beyond, like in just like how Bungie has crafted it. And I'm really like, the raid opens this Saturday, so I want to see how they do, because I love, you know what's fun about raid days, especially because there's so many teams that are hardcore that do a world's first race. So it's really cool to have like different
That's
windows
right.
that do like different windows to see how they who beats it first, because a raid in Destiny is like a Zelda dungeon. A multiplayer Zelda dungeon with 6 people, where you go through big, very elaborate scenarios and solve puzzles that don't give you a clue how to do it. You have to like be really observant about your environment scanning skills and how like things and dynamics play together, and see if like you have to split your team or not, and have actual communication. Like, you know how people say that in co-op, like, yeah, you can communicate in co-op, but most of the time when you're playing a co-op game, you're just talking trash with your friends and talk about, oh, what do you do today while you're blowing something up and all that? Yes or no? That's basically co-op. Not in Destiny 2's raids. You actually have to be like, you have to do this. Tell me when you're doing this and all that. It's like, I can't wait to see who wins and how this raid goes. Because last year when the raid happened, more story was open once someone completed the raid. It was really cool. Yeah, because it was like the raid wasn't the end. It was the beginning of like a meta narrative that moved into the seasonal content. So if they're already baking this in, I can't wait to see what things happen in Destiny next week. And that's the thing with that game, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't still be playing. Because I tend to be very ADD when it comes to games. Like, once I'm done, I like being playing the new thing over and over again. The fact I'm still stuck playing Destiny since like 2014 until today, like, says a lot about how much that thing changed my gaming habits. And I'm glad to have that new experience with the expansion. I saw my brother play the free-to-play version. I was kind of sitting next to him to see what that experience for a new player was like. And I'm like, very interesting how they reworked, how they inducts you into the experience. And the fact that you're at base level 750 now in your power level. So that means that you can jump straight to things now. You don't have to grind.
Yeah, that was definitely something that was curious to me, because I was probably stuck at like maybe 360 or something, and I was just not willing to deal with all that to get to the higher levels of light so that I could actually experience the rest of the game. I thought that was ridiculous.
Exactly, and Bungie realized that, because that was a big hurdle they faced last year with the Forsaken expansion, because it was like, come play our new thing, which is better than before. After you buy the main game and buy the other 2 expansions, and you grind for however many hours so you can reach the spot, that's just too much busy work. Like, so that was too much of a barrier for entry. Now they're like, screw it, we want all of you to be playing this content. Here's the light level, and they're like reworking how important light level is going to be for you to experience new content over time. So I really like how they're really adamant for you to play that game now, because it's just them now. Activision's gone. Like, a lot of the shady crap, it's gone. Like, with how they reward microtransactions and such, it's like, it's almost too generous of a game now. And I'm like, you can really tell that it's no longer a Bungie game with Activision ties. It's an actual just Bungie game, and I'm happy for it. And I can't wait to see how it develops over the next year, because I'll sure will be playing.
And I'm looking forward to trying it out myself. Well,
we can play together.
I am definitely willing to try that, because I'm told that is a game that you can really experience a lot more with even just one other person, as opposed to by yourself.
Oh yes. And just real quick, I played 2 other games. Like, Actually, today I played Apex Legends Season 3 because it also came
Oh,
out this year,
that's
this
right.
week,
I forgot about that
and the
entirely.
completely new map. In the third
Yes.
season, they already did a new map, and it's actually really cool. It's very visually appealing,
Yeah,
and
so I've been told it's like a fire and ice kind of situation.
a train around it.
And a train,
Uh-huh.
yes.
So I won my first match when I came back. I'm like, oh,
Really?
yep, my first match playing after a while, and I won.
Wow. Look at you go.
So yeah, that was fun. And on Switch, I played Ori and the Blind Forest Definitive Edition,
Ooh.
which is my third time playing that game because I beat it twice on Xbox One. That game was my game of the year in 2015, and it's equally as great on Switch. The fact that kind
So, full disclosure, I never got to play it because I think if I'm remembering right, it was like an Xbox and PC exclusive.
Yeah, it was.
That's why I never ended up playing it. But now it's on everything, and I just moved on so much that I just never went back. But would you recommend it for?
It's not on everything. It's just on Switch. That's the
Okay.
recent and 100. Do you like Metroidvanias?
It depends on how Metroidvania we're talking. Like, how much backtracking we got to do?
Not many. Like, there's like a main area that kind of connects to every different branches, but you rarely go to the same spot over and over again. It's very organic in how it evolves as a world. It's tough in a super Meat Boy kind of way, but it's also one of the more touching and most beautiful games I have ever played in my life. The very beginning of that game, it's a heart wrencher. Like Up. Think about Up.
Oh, I thought you were like Up as in good heart wrenching.
No.
I completely mixed. Okay,
Like the Pixar movie Up. Remember
yes,
the very,
I fully understand what you're talking about now.
So it's like it's very resonant and
oh boy,
and it has a level of mystique and intrigue that reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus. Like,
nice.
The soundtrack is the best soundtrack of any game of this generation. Just listen to it. It's like so like uplifting, melancholic, and epic at the same time. Like it's a really, really cool game, and it's not too long. It's $20. I remember, or was it 25? It's between 20 or 25 bucks on Nintendo Switch right now. It's like the perfect game for mobile. It's like beautiful. And there's been a little bit of a downgrade in visual quality, but which of course it's
want to cut you off. We're on like maybe our last minute before we get kicked off, I believe.
We're not, because it's just
we're not.
Us. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So.
I just wasn't sure because they had the they don't like tell us how much time we have left.
It's only if it's just the three of us. That's when.
Shoot! Well, then I was stressed out.
You cut. Hello. You still there?
Hit it.
Yep. You're still, yeah. You're cutting a little bit.
And I
there we go. No, yeah. If it's just the two of us, it's not gonna cut us. We can go as long. We can go as long as we want. It's only if we're in three people that there's a time limit.
And that's shoot. Well, then the last time I was
stressed out of your mind.
We did like a break in everything. I thought we were having to cut it off.
I know. That's when I learned, because when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, it's not giving me a timer, and it's still not giving me a timer. So I'll mark it up so that PJ can cut all this part in post-production. Giving us 5 seconds of quiet time, and I'll continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I was saying, with Ori, it's like on Switch, it's just as beauty. Like in the Switch screen, it's such a beautiful game. It's not as pretty as the Xbox version, of course. It's not gonna be, but I tell you, if you never have played this game, like, give it a try. Especially if you like that, if you like a unique kind of Metroidvania game that feels like Meat Boy. Like, can't stress that enough. Can't stress how great that game is.
All right.
Yeah. So, and I can't wait for the sequel in February. It's been a long time coming.
Do you know the title?
Ori and the Will of the Wisps.
The Will of the Wisps.
Yeah, which is got to be an Xbox exclusive again. So.
Of course.
More reason to try to get an Xbox, because they barely have a reason.
Shoot.
All right. That's all I've been playing.
All right. Well, that's awesome though, and I like that you got into some of the indie setup as well as the main big looter shooter.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and move on a little bit. We'll kind of pull back from the video games themselves and move on to the, at least briefly, the hardware. Recently, we saw a new possible confirmation of the look of the PlayStation 5. I recently found out that, well, I guess first impressions on what you're thinking, because you've gotten to see the images of it, right, Alejandro?
Are they the ones that look like a V?
Yes,
like
it looks crazy looking.
Yeah, to me with the V thing, like kind of like Disclosure, I think because there's not an actual full design. That's like the dev kit of the system, and usually the dev kits look different. A little different from like the final retail thing. It's gonna be like the dev kit of the PS4 look completely different to what the PS4 would be, but they're saying that they're trying to get the alignment of look between what the dev kit will be and the console to be closer together. So a V-shaped console, I'm trying to wrap my head around, because I'm like, how will that work in my entertainment setup? It's I'm like, especially with, because let's just be clear about it, like the PS4 original design was perfect as it was. The PS4 Pro is a complete mess of a design that I don't know why they made a thing too fat.
It's just a double-decker sandwich, man.
Exactly. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, it doesn't look too bad, but in like the slickness of the original design was so good, and even the slim still looks nice. Hopefully,
I do like it. I think there's a reason why they went away from the hard edges, though. I think there was some troubles that they were having with that, which is why they rounded the edges in the Slim and the PS4 Pro.
Yeah. It just makes it cheaper. That's the thing. It makes it cheaper to manufacture.
Oh, really? I just figured because it was easier to damage the hard edges like that.
That too, but most redesigns are always made to make things cheaper to manufacture, and therefore more profit.
Makes sense.
So I still say that the Pro is a little questionable, considering that the Xbox One X is an actually tiny console and is actually more powerful. So I think there's something about the hardware design about that one that maybe they didn't quite nail. Especially and now real quick, because you have a Pro, right?
I do.
And how loud is the fan on yours?
Being entirely honest, it is not very loud at all. There are a couple of situations where I'll hear it clearly trying to pull something together, but compared to my regular PlayStation 4, it is so much quieter, at least in my experience.
When did you get your Pro? Like, just out of curiosity, because
I got mine this year. I would say about definitely not 4, maybe like 6 or 7 months ago.
Okay, that's why you got the redesign of the Pro, because yours, it's like the electricity that you can hook it up with. It's not 3-pronged, right? It's just a regular 2-pronged electricity.
You might be right with that.
Yeah, so they intentionally made that to make the Pros less loud, because the original version of the Pro was like the 3-pronged electricity. So that was like consuming a lot of electricity, and at times it would make the thing feel like it was going on a jet takeoff, but even worse than the normal PS. I've heard videos, it's like, oh my god. And I have the regular PS4, and that thing is loud already. Just imagine that times 2. So you got lucky with your Pro. You got the nice redesign.
Oh, praise God, because I'm pretty sure I got it refurbished too.
Even better.
Yeah.
So, I wish I could have gotten one, but the new generation's coming. I don't need to get a mid-gen up. Because
I got mine only out of necessity. But otherwise, I would have been totally fine with my day one PS4.
So that your day one PS4 hit the sack? Like,
it sadly had to be put out Viking style on the water, and fired a fire arrow at it and everything, burned it to a crisp.
You all yellered it.
I old yellered the heck out of that sucker.
Yeah.
It sadly got the blue ring of death, not blue ring,
the
but
jello,
blue light.
the jello, yeah.
Yeah, where it will fail to connect to the TV basically, and we'll always get into this replay of the startup situation. And I was able to get it to alive a few times. I really teched the heck out of that thing. I was able to actually start switching all of my save data to the cloud manually, just to like get everything off of it, and then one day I woke up, turned it on, or tried to, and it refused for the last time. Fortunately, whatever I lost was not really worth anything, and I just eventually got a new system, re-downloaded everything, and kind of kept trucking along.
And now you have better looking and better running versions of the games. So
exactly. So it was kind of a win-win in the end.
And do you have a 4K TV, or were you still rocking a 1080p?
Oh, I am rocking definitely like a 1080,
okay.
if that, personally, because I've had this sucker since at least 2009. Damn, it is an old LCD. It's still got the I believe it's the RCA, the yellow, white, red jack-ins, as well as 2 HDMIs. I do not want to get rid of it just because of that fact that I can still play all my old stuff if I really wanted to.
Makes sense.
It is a bulky LCD. I will say that it is heavy. It's about 42 inches. And I got it inherited from my parents because they got something new, and they were like, we don't need this anymore. I was like, hey, I'll take it off.
But the games look good, right? That's what matters, because that's the thing with the TVs, is like, if for you in your criteria they look great, like, why even bother upgrading?
I will say there is a couple of issues, one of which is that there's a lot of heat warping along the vinyl. I have been able to look past it for my entire time being there, because you don't really notice it unless the entire screen is one color. And then it's very obvious. But as things are happening, it's like looking at through a fence. You really just don't notice it anymore. Or like looking past your nose, which I just ruined that for everyone. The other thing that is a slight issue is I believe they call it the refresh rate is not the best, because like there's a lot of things that are 60 frames per second and will look smooth and crisp. No matter how good the processing power, the game itself or the movie itself is, it will not do it on that TV. And it will never look that smooth, and it tears me up. But then I can do it on my roommate's TV and my little computer monitor. So
so you got a solution there.
I currently have one, but it just kind of makes me realize, I was like, man, it's kind of nice to have something that looks this smooth.
Yeah, because if not, it's going to be a jittery mess if you're trying to run something faster in the refresh rate.
Right.
But yeah, going back to PS5, like, I just hope it's not a bulky mess, because they got it so right at the beginning of PS4. And if Xbox One X was able to put so much power in a system that was even smaller than the Xbox One S, I think they can do it. I think they just got a little blindsided by Microsoft's suddenly getting their design chops for hardware like in check. Especially compared to the bulky ass original Xbox One, which is a nightmare. That's the one I have here right now, and it's a nightmare to move around.
You mean the VCR?
Yeah, the VCR, literally. So they really it makes me hopeful that whatever their Scarlet is gonna it's definitely going to be slick looking, because they know that people don't want bulky stuff unless it really demands it. Like, you know how some CPUs demand you to have something really bulky if you put the most high end of stuff.
Right.
I think that's the only time that I kind of give it a pass. In this PS4 Pro versus Xbox One X thing, I think it's more like, Microsoft really did design something really cool to be able to be that small. So very impressive. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. I'd say that's about enough on the PlayStation and the Xbox talk. I'd say one of the last things that I'd like to bring up is one of the big ones. Now, you see, for everybody listening, this happened the day after we recorded our podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be the news that Spider-Man has returned to the MCU.
Yep. And I think it was 2 episodes ago or 3, whenever. I think it was the last time that you and I were recording, or was it with Zach? I think it was with Zach, probably, that the Spider-Man news of him not being in the MCU was
That
kind of
might
like
have,
completely destroyed.
yeah, that was either my
Okay.
first episode or one of his last.
Yeah. So whenever that happened, like, can't believe 3 or 4 episodes later that thing got reversed, because
Real.
of course they would, because they would have been stupid if they had not patched these things up. Like, what do you think of this thing? Like,
My first instinct was immense distrust. I was like, okay, like it's either got to be fake or there's got to be some major catch to it.
mhm.
Then after a while, I started to get really hopeful and had that Hawkeye moment where I was like, just don't give me hope.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Then I actually got really excited as everybody was actually like responding, and like Tom Holland was responding to it, which I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh shoot, well yeah, definitely it's got to be real if he's knowing about it now that it's confirmed. And then it kind of went back. Where I'm currently at is a little bit of hesitancy, because I heard there was some context for it that supposedly it is only for one more movie,
Mhm.
and that he might in fact go back out of, like, they're going to write him out of the universe as a whole,
Yeah.
so it's continuity wise, and then he's out of the universe for good, and that's what
Yeah.
I'm currently really worried about.
So, kind of what I like, some of the key phrases that they were mentioned, like Kevin Feige, MCU Overlord, mentioned something about how great it is for them to be able to continue his story for one more movie. And he's also going to be in a team up for the MCU. So he's back for 2 more.
Oh, so he's good for like one solo and one
Yeah.
mainline setup.
Yeah, like if like he can appear in someone else's movie, like let's say Captain Marvel 2, for example.
Yeah.
If they want to put him in he could do that. But then he mentioned something. This is very key to like what I think would be something really cool if it actually happens and it's well executed. He said this. The Spider-Man is one of those few characters that has the reach and the eminence to be able to appear in 2 cinematic universes, implying that this Tom Holland's version can exist as an MCU character, but also exist in whatever Sony is doing. And what's funny when he said that was that the day before those news broke, it was said that Sony was developing a Madame Web movie, which for people who don't know, Madame Web is like it's kind of one of the catalysts for like a multiverse within Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, wouldn't it be cool that Sony would be setting up like Madame Web, so that whenever they're done in the MCU using Spider-Man, he kind of like leaps through Madame Webs and he goes to the alternate universe that is Sony, and then eventually like he could always come back in and out and potentially do Spider-Verse in live action. Like, I'm like, I feel that's as good of a compromise as they could have found.
Yeah. I think that would be best of both worlds. If he can actually exist within both, then all my fears are totally fine.
Yeah.
Something that I was thinking of was that would fit in with the idea that he is now on the run, goes through something crazy with his next movie, has to leave his universe, even say, if only briefly, but supposedly with the idea that he is now going to make a life for himself in like a new universe or something.
Exactly.
So as I understand it, so Tom Holland can appear as Spider-Man in both, or do they need to find a new actor for the other?
He can appear in both. Right now, he can appear in both. Yeah.
Man, that boy is set then.
Exactly. And
Holy moly.
And you read that he was very instrumental in them repairing this thing?
Now, I was really distrustful of that too, because originally it was saying, oh, Tom Holland may have played a small part in it, and then it, like, as the day went on, that the articles gotten more and more like as I was thinking, it was blown out of proportion to the point where it's like Tom Holland is the key only reason why this happened, and I was like, okay, guys, come on. So
Yeah,
is there
they're
actually some
overblowing it.
truth
Yeah.
to that?
Apparently, so many things were like, it came from Deadline initially. So Deadline is someone that it's not about clickbait. They actually have sources for it. So I tend to believe this. I also don't believe it's gonna. He's like the sole reason why this thing happened. But I believe he played a key role of like him going to the heads and talking some sense into it. To be like, guys, figure something out. And I think the one that escapes a lot of people that at the end of the day, this wasn't Sony's fault. This was Disney. They overstepped with what they wanted, to get out with like a reworking of the deal. And yeah, now they got 25%, and Sony actually got a really good raw end of the deal, because here's what's so funny about their previous arrangement. Spider-Man was not gonna appear in any of Sony's movies. Like they couldn't use him in Venom, they couldn't use him in the previous deal. Now this new deal, not only he can be in MCU, now they can use him in his own movies if they want. So so it's like actually Sony came out on top of this one, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
in a way.
and
But
if that's all the case, then I think the fans are even more so a winner, because now we get to see Spider-Man in literally everything. And being the fact that Spider-Man has been my favorite superhero my entire life, and granted pretty much a large percentage of all comic book fans are also like heavily Spider-Man fans.
Oh yeah, Spider-Man is the most popular superhero ever.
I'd say that's the whole reason why any of this has happened in the first place, because the fan desire was so heavy that they were able to even get him in Civil War in the first place. I remember when that trailer dropped, and at the very end, Spider-Man shows up. It blew everybody's freaking minds.
Yeah, because it's like it actually happening.
Yeah,
that was like a thing that no one ever thought could happen, and it did, and they did it so well. Like they did a unique version of this character so well. So it's like, and he's so beloved. So why ruin, like Sony couldn't, like why would Sony ever go through the trouble of having to recast when their version of this character this current version is so universally beloved? Like Spider-Man Homecoming is not my favorite Spider-Man movie at all, but it's still a fun thing that cemented that character, this version of the character. And I really love Far From Home, and his appearances in Avengers were so cool. Like, and I'm glad that they were able to work this out, because we were like, I remember how bummed and crestfallen I was when I read that thing, that thing completely fell apart between both of them. He was not gonna be there, especially after how Far From Home ended. Like, it was like, because I think that more than anything, that's why it stung more, because there was no way you could spin this in a way that, this was always the plan. Like, we did enough movies here and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, that wasn't the plan. You're not going to be setting up Spider-Man as your Iron Man successor.
Right. Only to have him disappear.
It's only to have him disappear. So that's why I was like, you knew that this was never the plan. And it's a good thing that it only took 2 months for this to like, for it to be completely fixed.
Right.
But yeah, it's good. And Kevin Feige, once again, being busy, because he's going to be very busy now doing another Spider-Man movie and all the same movies. And let's not forget that he also has to find a way to work in the Fantastic Four and X-Men into the MCU, which he said back in Comic-Con. And I don't know if you saw this, but do you see that Kevin Feige has been tapped to do a Star Wars movie also?
I have not, but that is very interesting to me.
Yeah, because
holy moly.
Yeah. That broke, was it last week, 2 weeks? Whenever it broke. But I remember that was like, oh my God, Kevin Feige doing Star Wars.
He's just doing one Star Wars movie, or does he get in a trilogy, or what?
He just said that he's developing a Star Wars movie. But the way I'm seeing this is just let's put the tinfoil hats for a second. Like, Disney CEO Bob Iger, his contract is up in 2021. He's about to have a successor, and guess whose other contract is also expiring in 2021?
Is it Kevin Feige?
No, Kathleen Kennedy. The
Oh,
lady that's overseeing Star Wars right now. And
yes.
now, wouldn't it be interesting that, especially after how tumultuous this whole Disney Star Wars era has been, unfortunately, that they would somehow, especially keep in mind that the whatchamacallit, man, I just heard something and I lost my train of thought.
How does it
Dang it.
feel?
Yeah, it feels it's a really it sucks when it happens. Wouldn't it be fun if they had Kevin Feige shepherd the future of Star Wars afterwards?
That would be fantastic. Now, what I fear is a Joss Whedon situation where he gets completely burned out because all of this stuff is now on his shoulders, almost exclusively to fix, like constantly.
Yes.
I'm worried that he's going to burn himself out with this stuff, and eventually the pressure is going to get to him, and he's going to completely step down from all of this, and then all of his current, like, Avengers level products and all of his projects are going to just go by the wayside. They're going to be split to the winds. Every individual person is going to try to do their own thing, and it's not going to match up.
Yeah. Now, I finally remember what I was also going to say. Like, Kevin Feige has always said that he's always been a huge Star Wars fan, like from the very beginning. Phase 2 of the MCU is even actually like every single MCU movie of Phase 2, starting from Iron Man 3 all the way to the first Ant-Man, has an Empire Strikes Back reference. You know which one that was? Yeah, there's always a character in one of those movies that loses their freaking hand or arm. Who loses their hand in Empire Strikes Back? Luke. So, like, having a longtime Star Wars fan that has found so much success with the MCU, like, taking over. So, because imagine this, what about if you gotta imagine he's burning out of Marvel. Like, he's been doing 23 movies and counting and all that, but he has also had people like Luis Esposito and Vicky something that have been with him shepherding this whole thing, and they've also been at press junkets. Imagine if one of them takes the reins going forward and Kevin Feige takes over Star Wars. Like,
that would be very interesting.
And I could see that being how he beats burnout.
And he would definitely be somebody I would trust far more for a shared universe of continuing Star Wars than I believe anybody else has been doing. Because I was actually going to say at the start of all this, you gave me a good idea with what we were talking about with Joker is what better series could probably do with a reset button than with Star Wars getting its own individualized movies where you don't have to worry about this big overarching storyline. I think that's what Rian Johnson wanted to do. Respect for him to try and to do that. It just wasn't the right situation or
the right movie for him to do that. Also,
not
The
at
Last
all.
Jedi, and also the Game of Thrones guys are also doing a Star Wars trilogy as opposed to the Knights of the Old Republic, according to the rumors.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yes, and they're gonna be completely separate from Chosen One talk, from Skywalkers and all that. It's just like, because that's
you can't.
Yeah, you can't. Like, that's completely separate from all of that. And I feel that's what they need, because I really like The Last Jedi, but I understand why people got triggered by it, because it was like a movie that deconstructed what a lot of people thought Star Wars was. And Rian Johnson was there to really like break some toys and show that things needed to move on for things to evolve, which I feel it's really necessary for Star Wars to move on from just being a nostalgia driven thing, because now it's just never gonna fulfill its potential that it can with limitless stuff. But doing that in the middle of your a trilogy that's still centered on the Skywalkers in a way, it's why I understand why people got so offended by it. And that's why I'm excited for his trilogy, because now it'll be like, okay, you're completely untethered from any Skywalker, any tradition. Show us what your Star Wars movie can be. And if it even is Star Wars at that point. Like, if it's really Star Wars in everything but name, like, or in only name. So It's
Yep.
a
So I'm very excited about that knowledge because I
yeah.
wasn't fully aware of a lot of that. Now, I know we're kind of running short on some of our time.
Mhm.
I wanted to do one last thing. So I remembered the thing that I forgot at the very start of this about
Mhm.
20 minutes ago, and I
Sweet.
wrote it down
I told
so
you
in a
that it
full
would happen.
question so that we can discuss this last little thing. It's separate enough that we can talk about it on its own. And I know we were talking about the idea of knowing something and not knowing something and manipulation of information. So my question that I want
Mhm.
to discuss just briefly is, does the knowledge of how something is going to play out, or the belief, like how you understand, oh, this is going to happen then,
Mhm.
and it happens, does that ruin the experience?
I think it depends because I feel some people like seeing things that they've seen in anticipation and they just want things to go the way they think. And it's so funny that we were talking about Star Wars because what was
Mm-hmm.
the big Luke quote of that movie?
Well, Empire
Uh,
Strikes Back.
no, and Last Jedi. What?
Oh, wait, which one? The walking, the facing down the entire first order with a laser sword?
No. This is not gonna go the way you think.
Oh, okay, yeah,
That was
there
like,
was.
yeah, exactly. And I feel that was a big thing why a lot of people got triggered in that movie because of like the whole they were expecting things to go a certain way
Mm-hmm.
because of certain anticipation. That movie took a hard left
It
on
really
so
did.
many things. So I feel like for the majority of people, it's become very clear they don't like things going the way they're not going the way they think because I feel things surprising you can be jarring at first, but you tend to appreciate things not going the way you anticipated way down the line instead of
Mm.
in the moment. I think there's always a sense of like bitterness at the beginning of like, oh, this is not what I was expecting, but it takes time for them to be like, ah, this is probably the right choice because it's stuck with me.
Yeah,
At least that's how I see it.
I would say I can make maybe a slightly different analogy, like kind of pulling us in a different direction. I would say it also depends, um, and this isn't specifically talking about like spoilers, for instance. This is
Mm-hmm.
just the idea of, if something is predictable, does that just inherently make it bad?
Mm-hmm.
I have always been somebody that I couldn't put the words to it, but now that I can, I would say absolutely not. It does
Mm-hmm.
not ruin the experience. If
Exactly.
not, it can actually make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like that's why I was bringing in that whole Alfred Hitchcock idea,
Mm-hmm.
which I couldn't connect it at the time, is that if you shock somebody, that's like if you have this plan set up and then you shock someone, that doesn't make it good, and that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you subverted their expectations.
Exactly.
Just like the Game of Thrones final
Exactly.
season,
Yeah, subverting
they built up,
expectations in the worst way possible.
yeah, they build up 8 seasons, and then they say, oh, you see, we've set this whole thing up, we're going to go this different direction, ah ha ha, aren't we such great writers because
Mm-hmm.
we've subverted your expectations? No,
Mm-hmm.
you've just
No.
walked in and shot the main character
Um,
randomly and been like, oh, look at this.
exactly.
um but then you've
It always
got,
has to have
yeah,
meaning. It always has to have
yeah.
meaning. Yeah.
And even if it doesn't have meaning at that moment, it has to be established at least at some point why, that's why that had to happen,
Mm-hmm.
because you'll have something that, like the Red Wedding, for instance, from Game of Thrones, which
Mm-hmm.
was a complete curveball at the time,
Yeah.
but then it was explained like it made sense in the story, in the way it's set up. They had motivation.
Exactly. And that's was the beauty, especially watching the show in that third season. Like the Red Wedding was like the result of episode after episode of Rob and Kathleen being idiots, completely like making mistake after mistake and after mistake without the grace of Ned Stark. So they got their coupons in in their hubris and in their own complete incompetence.
Hmm.
That's the reason why that thing they got played.
Yeah.
So it's like that's what makes it beautiful because it's like it's a twist, but you see how it was smartly seated, and I feel it all hinges on execution because I feel something can be predictable. Like I was telling with Joker, there's a lot of that movie that's highly predictable, but the execution is so succinctly good that it didn't matter.
Exactly.
It's just about letting it happen. So yeah, it's like I feel it's a more nuanced topic in a way, but it all hinges on execution and also expectations, because if your expectations are always about things having to go a certain way and they can never deviate, I think you're always setting yourself up for disappointment in a way. So yeah, it's yeah, I feel like, yeah, it's maybe a 50-50 in different ways. So but yeah, it's an interesting question to always pose, especially with the reaction of the recent things.
Yes. So I would like to pose that as the discussion question. If anybody that listens to this later on would love to comment on it, we will absolutely love a discussion going on. Does the knowledge of what is going to happen next in your own perception ruin that experience? Why not? Let us know. And I would love to personally be interested in some discussions on what y'all think about that. But with that, sadly, Alejandro, our time is up, and we need to go ahead and go to bed.
Exactly.
But I have enjoyed this episode. I was very fearful about my lack of energy and our trying to pull some things together. We had a good conversation, I'd say.
This was even more fun than last week, I would even say.
Oh yes, and just imagine when we have a good night's rest and we can actually do this at a normal time.
Yeah. And after a recording, I got some news to tell you, but it's just behind the scenes stuff. So,
all right, good stuff.
Okay.
So until then, ladies and gentlemen that are listening to us, we will see y'all next week. Same stat time, same stat channel. We will be doing our best to bring you the best news and the best discussions that we possibly can. But until then, this is Paul.
This is Alejandro.
And we will see y'all next time.
Y'all have a good night or a good day whenever you're listening.
And adios, stay frosty, and Statics Radio will come back another time.